Sarah and Lily looked like the perfect mother and daughter, smiling in the neighborhood and blending seamlessly into everyday life. But behind closed doors, they were part of a secret that would shock their entire community. Sarah lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where life seemed ordinary, almost perfect. On the outside, she appeared to be the kind of mother every parent admired. She drove a neat car, kept her house immaculate, and always dressed her daughter, Lily, in clean, carefully chosen outfits. To friends and neighbors, Sarah was devoted, attentive, and loving, the sort of parent who baked cookies for school events and volunteered at the local library. But beneath that carefully curated image, a hidden world thrived, one that few could imagine. Sarah had developed an unusual philosophy about teaching her daughter life skills. She believed that the world was harsh and unforgiving, and the best way to prepare Lily for it was not through lessons in honesty or responsibility, but through lessons in cunning and manipulation. It started subtly, with Sarah pointing out small things in their daily life. She would comment on how expensive certain items were, how tempting displays could influence spending, and how stores often left gaps in their security without anyone noticing. To Sarah, these were not mere observations, they were opportunities. She believed she could show Lily how to navigate these gaps, how to spot weaknesses, and how to take advantage of them without drawing attention. Her instructions were precise, almost methodical, emphasizing careful observation and patience. Sarah insisted that every trip to Target could become a classroom for practical, real-world skills. Lily, barely 10 years old, was impressionable and eager to please her mother. She hung on every word, believing that these secret lessons were special privileges rather than something wrong. Sarah began with small, harmless items, lip glosses, toys, and inexpensive snacks. She wanted Lily to understand the mechanics of taking items without triggering alarms or being noticed. At first, Sarah herself handled the stolen goods, guiding Lily step by step. She would carefully select which aisles to walk, which items to touch, and even which expressions to wear when passing employees. Sarah emphasized the importance of confidence, explaining that hesitation or fear would betray them. Every detail was scrutinized and rehearsed as if Lily were practicing for an important performance. The store became their stage. Sarah watched as Lily absorbed each lesson, mimicking her mother's movements and mannerisms. Sarah praised Lily for her attention to detail and her growing skill, framing each successful attempt as a triumph. For Lily, these outings were thrilling adventures, shrouded in secrecy and excitement. She learned to notice cameras, to observe the patterns of store employees, and to estimate which sections of the store were less monitored. With each visit, her confidence grew, as did her sense of pride in mastering something so clandestine. Sarah also taught Lily to rationalize the behavior, framing it as a test of intelligence rather than wrongdoing. She told Lily that most people never noticed the clever ones who could outsmart the system, and that they were learning how the world worked, gaining an edge that few others would ever have. The lessons blurred the line between right and wrong, and Lily absorbed them unquestioningly. Outside the store, Sarah was warm and nurturing, the perfect mother. Inside, she was a meticulous teacher, shaping her daughter into a participant in her own secret schemes, showing her a world that felt exciting, dangerous, and thrilling, all under the guise of education. The routine became ingrained. Each trip to Target was carefully planned, each lesson deliberate, and each successful act of taking something without being caught reinforced the bond between mother and daughter. To Sarah, it was a way to teach resilience and cunning. To Lily, it was a game, a test, and a secret she could share only with the person she trusted most. The quiet neighborhood remained oblivious, unaware that behind closed doors, a mother was transforming her daughter's innocence into something far darker, teaching her skills that were not meant for school or life, but for theft. As the weeks passed, Lily's confidence in the lessons Sarah had taught her grew steadily. What had begun as a series of carefully monitored trips to Target evolved into something more daring. Sarah encouraged Lily to observe the store closely, to notice patterns that only someone paying careful attention would see. Lily learned which aisles were less monitored, which displays had blind spots, and when the employees were most distracted. Sarah explained that timing was everything, and that patience and observation could make even the boldest thefts invisible. The thrill of sneaking items past watchful eyes became intoxicating, and Lily's heart raced with excitement each time she succeeded. Every trip reinforced a sense of skill and accomplishment that she had never experienced before, and she began to crave the sensation of beating the system. The first few times Lily attempted to steal on her own, Sarah stayed nearby but out of sight. She watched as her daughter approached a display, selected a small item, and carried it past the checkout without drawing attention. Lily's hands trembled slightly, but she managed to act natural, exactly as her mother had instructed. When they left the store, Sarah congratulated her with a quiet, knowing smile, praising her composure and careful execution. That sense of validation created a bond between them that felt almost secretive, as if they shared an understanding no one else could grasp. For Lily, the combination of fear and exhilaration was addictive. She felt powerful, capable, and clever in a way that school or playtime had never offered. With each successful attempt, Sarah pushed Lily further, gradually increasing the complexity of the thefts. Small items became slightly larger or more expensive products, and the trips became less structured. Lily began to memorize employee routines, recognizing when staff would glance away and when the store was busiest. She even learned to carry items subtly in her backpack, lining them with clothing to avoid detection. The lessons were precise, each one designed to build skill and confidence while minimizing the risk of getting caught. Lily was growing into a careful observer, developing instincts for timing, awareness, and evasion. The thrill of mastery extended beyond the store. At home, Lily would recount the trips in her mind, replaying each movement and analyzing what worked and what nearly failed. Sarah praised this reflection, framing it as evidence of intelligence and strategy. Lily began to see the trips to Target as a challenge, a puzzle she had to solve with cunning and attention to detail. The excitement of planning, executing, and escaping detection created a sense of purpose and exhilaration that neither of them admitted to anyone else. However, beneath the excitement, there was an undercurrent of tension. Each trip carried a small but real risk, and the awareness of potential consequences added to the adrenaline. Lily began to feel the weight of responsibility, knowing that mistakes could lead to being caught and punished. Sarah used this fear to teach caution, stressing that overconfidence was dangerous and patience was essential. The balance between fear and excitement became a central part of the lessons, sharpening Lily's instincts and keeping her focused. As time went on, the pattern became almost ritualistic. Sarah would plan the trips carefully, teaching new techniques and observing Lily's growing proficiency. Each success reinforced the thrill and deepened the bond between mother and daughter, while also embedding the dangerous idea that deception and cunning could be tools for survival and advantage. The lessons were no longer about small experiments. They had become a calculated routine, a mixture of strategy, risk, and exhilaration that Lily could not resist. The excitement of outsmarting the store and the rush of doing something forbidden became a central part of her life, shaping her in ways that would echo far beyond the aisles of Target. As Lily grew more confident in her abilities, subtle changes began to appear in her behavior outside the store. At first, they were almost imperceptible. Small hesitations when talking about school, fleeting glances when discussing errands, and a tendency to hide her hands in pockets or bags. Friends and neighbors noticed she had become more secretive, but they attributed it to the normal curiosity and independence of a child entering her preteen years. At home, Sarah continued to reinforce the lessons while carefully maintaining the appearance of normalcy. She would praise Lily for her intelligence and focus, framing the secrecy as a necessary skill in mastering the game of life. The boundary between the thrill of success and the anxiety of potential exposure began to blur, creating a subtle but persistent tension in Lily's world. Employees at the Target store slowly started noticing patterns they could not explain. Certain items seemed to vanish with alarming frequency, yet no single individual could be identified as the culprit. Surveillance footage occasionally captured glimpses of a small figure moving in ways that did not immediately seem suspicious. The management team began adjusting staff schedules and intensifying their monitoring, but the gaps Sarah had trained Lily to exploit remained difficult to predict. Each visit to the store became a delicate balance of observation and timing, with Lily executing the lessons she had learned with precision. Her sense of accomplishment grew, but so did the weight of maintaining secrecy under increasing scrutiny. At home, the psychological impact of living a double life began to show. Lily's grades in school remained strong, but she started to withdraw from some social activities, preferring the controlled excitement of her outings with her mother. She became more cautious, observing not only her environment, but also the reactions of those around her. Sarah continued to push the boundaries gently, encouraging Lily to refine her technique and manage the mounting stress as part of her training. The mother framed every challenge as a test of skill and resilience, creating a sense of purpose in Lily that blurred the line between right and wrong. The relationship between mother and daughter grew increasingly insular. Sarah took care to ensure that the lessons were never discussed outside the household, and Lily obeyed out of a mixture of fear and admiration. Each successful trip reinforced a pattern of secrecy and cleverness, while any misstep, however minor, was treated as an opportunity to improve strategy rather than a moral failing. Lily began to internalize this worldview, seeing rules as obstacles rather than guides, and believing that intelligence and careful observation could allow her to bypass consequences. The tension escalated further as Sarah expanded the scope of their activities. Trips to the store became more frequent, each outing carefully planned, but carrying a heightened sense of risk. Employees occasionally lingered near areas where items had disappeared, and Lily could sense the subtle changes in their vigilance. The adrenaline that had once been purely exciting now carried a sharper edge, mingled with the fear of detection. This fear was woven into the lessons, creating a mix of exhilaration and stress that strengthened both Lily's skill and her dependence on her mother. Neighbors, unaware of the growing criminal pattern, began to speculate about Sarah and Lily's frequent outings. Some noticed the odd timing of their trips, the way they returned with more than they could reasonably afford, and the careful way Sarah always seemed to survey the neighborhood before leaving. Yet no one could have guessed the reality, that a mother was systematically grooming her child to steal, teaching her to balance cunning with discretion, and embedding these behaviors into her daily life. The household, which outwardly appeared ordinary, had become a laboratory for deception, a controlled environment in which skill, risk, and secrecy intertwined to shape Lily's understanding of the world. The illusion of control that Sarah had carefully maintained began to unravel in ways she had never anticipated. One afternoon, during a routine trip to Target, Lily felt a sudden wave of panic. She had been moving carefully through the aisles, her small hands clutching a few items she had memorized for their lessons, when she caught the flash of a security camera moving in her peripheral vision. Her stomach tightened, and an unfamiliar fear gripped her chest. For the first time, she realized that despite all of her training and careful observation, she could be caught. That fear, intense and immediate, overwhelmed the thrill she had once felt, and she froze in place. Lily's reaction did not go unnoticed. A store employee had seen the way she hesitated and began to follow her discreetly. Lily's heart pounded as she tried to appear normal, but the tension inside her was visible in subtle movements. A glance over her shoulder, a clutching of her backpack, a slight quickening of her pace. By the time she exited the store, her pulse was racing, and the weight of the secret she had carried for months suddenly felt unbearable. That night, She confided in a close relative, revealing the truth of everything that had been happening under Sarah's careful guidance. She described the lessons, the trips, and the manipulation, all in vivid detail. The confession triggered a chain reaction. The relative contacted the authorities, and investigators quickly began reviewing surveillance footage from the Target store as well as other locations where similar thefts had occurred. The footage revealed what Sarah had meticulously hidden, a series of calculated thefts carried out by both mother and daughter over several months. Each clip showed careful planning, observation, and execution, highlighting a deliberate strategy that went far beyond ordinary shoplifting. Law enforcement officers were struck by the level of precision and coordination, as well as the disturbing fact that a child had been systematically trained to participate. When police approached Sarah, the carefully constructed image of the perfect mother began to crumble. Her calm demeanor faltered under questioning, and investigators pieced together the timeline of events, documenting the manipulation and grooming that had occurred. Sarah's actions were revealed not simply as theft, but as a calculated exploitation of a child for criminal purposes. Evidence from receipts, surveillance footage, and witness statements painted a portrait of deliberate planning and consistent patterns. It became clear that Sarah had used her bond with Lily as a tool, creating a situation in which the child's loyalty and admiration were weaponized to facilitate the crimes. The community, initially shocked by the arrest, struggled to comprehend how a mother could involve her own child in such activities. Experts later described the case as an example of grooming that extended into criminal behavior, noting that the manipulation of a child's trust and sense of safety can have long-lasting psychological effects. Lily, meanwhile, faced a mixture of relief and fear, grappling with the consequences of her actions and the betrayal of trust by the person she had relied on most. The revelation of the crimes sent ripples through the neighborhood, leaving families and friends to question how often appearances conceal dangerous secrets. Authorities expanded the investigation, uncovering evidence that Sarah had targeted multiple stores and meticulously trained Lily to exploit predictable patterns in employee routines and store layouts. Each detail revealed the depth of her planning and the intensity of the manipulation. The case became a striking example of how criminal behavior can be taught, how innocence can be exploited, and how a carefully constructed image of normalcy can mask dangerous intentions. The unraveling of Sarah's scheme served as a stark turning point, transforming what had seemed like a private game into a cautionary tale about the consequences of manipulation, deception, and misplaced trust. Sarah's arrest sent shockwaves through the quiet suburban community. Neighbors who had once admired her attention to detail and dedication to her daughter now struggled to reconcile that image with the reality of her crimes. Authorities charged her not only with theft but also with child endangerment, citing the deliberate manipulation of Lily as a particularly egregious factor. Court documents and police reports painted a clear picture of months of careful planning, training, and execution, revealing a pattern that had placed Lily at risk while normalizing illegal behavior. The news of the case quickly spread, sparking conversations about parental responsibility, trust, and the ways in which a child's innocence can be exploited for personal gain. Lily's life was dramatically altered in the aftermath. Removed from the environment that had fostered her involvement in theft, she entered counseling to process the complex emotions she now faced. Relief mixed with fear, guilt, and confusion as she grappled with the realization that the person she had trusted most had deliberately led her into criminal activity. Her counselors worked to help her separate the lessons she had been taught from her own moral compass, guiding her to understand that while she had participated, the responsibility for the manipulation lay entirely with Sarah. Over time, Lily began to rebuild her sense of security and trust, learning to navigate a world in which the boundaries between right and wrong were once distorted. The community also faced the challenge of making sense of the events. Parents and neighbors expressed disbelief, struggling to accept that a mother could exploit her child so deliberately. Experts and psychologists offered insight, explaining that grooming for criminal behavior, while rare, can have profound and lasting impacts on a child's development. They noted that children in such situations often experience confusion, guilt, and anxiety, even when removed from the influence of the manipulator. The case became a point of reflection for families, highlighting the importance of awareness, communication, and vigilance in protecting children from hidden dangers. Legal proceedings against Sarah were thorough and highly publicized. The evidence collected by investigators, from surveillance footage to testimony, made a compelling case that she had intentionally taught Lily to steal and exploit vulnerabilities in stores. In court, the depth of her planning and the psychological manipulation she employed were emphasized, underscoring the severity of her actions. The sentencing reflected both the criminal acts themselves and the moral breach inherent in using a child as an accomplice. The outcome served as a warning that actions that seem private or hidden can have significant, far-reaching consequences. The story of Sarah and Lily became a cautionary tale beyond the immediate community. Journalists, educators, and child development specialists highlighted it as an example of how easily innocence can be exploited, demonstrating the importance of guidance, ethical instruction, and supervision in a child's formative years. Discussions emerged about the subtle ways manipulation can occur, even in families that appear outwardly normal, and the responsibility adults bear in shaping behavior and values. For Lily, the long-term impact of her experiences remained a central focus. Therapy and support networks helped her rebuild trust and develop a sense of personal accountability distinct from the lessons imposed by her mother. Over time, she began to reclaim her identity, learning that intelligence, observation, and skill could be applied to positive, constructive pursuits rather than deception. The case remained a stark reminder that criminal behavior can sometimes be taught, and that the consequences of manipulation and betrayal can extend far beyond a single act. The legacy of the events left an indelible mark on both the child and the community, reinforcing the importance of vigilance, guidance, and moral responsibility in the lives of young people.